If I were Prime Minister, if I were Prime Minister, I would not talk to someone whose PhD was a denial of the Holocaust. If I was the Prime Minister of Israel, I wouldn't talk to someone who wanted parts of the land of Israel to be Judenrein. After all, how could it be that the ancestral home of the Jewish people shouldn't have any? If I was the Prime Minister, I would annex Judea Samaria. I would have annexed Gaza, except that right now they can't. If I am the Prime Minister, I would build thousands of units, just as they are planned. And I wouldn't back down at all, because this is Israel. I wouldn't go ahead and be afraid and intimidated because the EU or John Kerry is speaking on the other end of the phone. I would tell them, this is the land of Israel. And in the land of Israel, anywhere in the land of Israel, a Jew can live and a Jew can build a house. And if you don't like it, go back to your Bible and tear it up. If I was the Prime Minister, I would develop the oil and the gas as soon as possible and become absolute energy independent. If I was the Prime Minister of Israel, I would refuse to take a penny in foreign aid from the United States. It is like a drug, and it is always held over us. If I was the Prime Minister, I would develop an Israeli arms production. If I was the Prime Minister, I would develop Israeli jets and Israeli missiles. And the reason for that is so that we wouldn't be beholden to another government who could turn off our supply when they so desired. Israeli ingenuity today is capable of creating its own missiles and its own jet planes, unnecessary to go ahead and to wait for the United States. If I was the Prime Minister, I wouldn't talk about striking Iran. I would strike Iran, and I wouldn't talk about it. If I was the Prime Minister, I would never discuss anything that had to do with withdrawing from borders of Israel that was in the time of the temple, nor would I discuss any kind of two-state solution with the so-called Palestinians. I would tell the Palestinians, you are a defeated people. You have two choices. Either you go to Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Ethiopia, the Sudan, or Eritrea, or any number of nations, including Indonesia, will send you there by a nice ferry, nice trip. You have that option, or you can become part of the community here and swearing allegiance by your belief that you will follow the Constitution of Israel. That's what I would tell them. You are defeated nations, and defeated people don't dictate where a Jew is allowed to live, where a Jew is not allowed to live. If I was the Prime Minister, I would not allow any excavations by the Arabs on the Temple Mount. If I was the Prime Minister, I would make sure that the site of Rachel's tomb should have a synagogue on it, that there should be 24/7 involvement, constantly being ferried right there into Bethlehem without any problems. If I was the Prime Minister, I would alter the face of the Tomb of the Patriarchs. I would establish a marketplace there, and I would have Palestinians who want to have bargains come and shop over there. If I was the Prime Minister, I would foster greater understanding between the peoples if I could, but I would insist that any kind of an understanding between the Arabs in Israel and the Jews in Israel, and I mean greater Israel, including Judea and Samaria, would be based upon the absolute understanding that all education has to teach peace and harmony amongst people. Any kind of education that teaches death or suicide or attacking other people would be deemed inappropriate, would not be funded. If I was the Prime Minister, I would make sure that all of the universities would teach the same principles of peace, brotherhood, and the belief in the law as opposed to Sharia. If I was the Prime Minister, I would make conscription in the army an option. I would have a volunteer army, and I would pay them well. If I was the Prime Minister, I would change the way the educational system is run in Israel, and I would return to a biblical-based education where Jewish children would know where they came from. If I was the Prime Minister, I would throw out all of those so-called educators who has as their basis the total rejection of the ancestral claims of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. I would throw out Professor Finkelstein and all of his cohorts without any feeling of guilt at all. If I was the Prime Minister of Israel, I would not be Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you.